Delighted to have everyone here. My name is Ross Tuffee. I'm an honorary professor and Entrepreneurial Residence at Stirling University. Also the author of the Scottish Government's policy on entrepreneurial campuses, so the Entrepreneurial Campus Blueprint, which is available online if anyone's interested in looking at that. Today we're going to explore a particular subject which is really relevant today, as about 2 hours ago the UK government published its plans to tighten UK immigration. So what we want to talk about is exploring the landscape, what the landscape looks like for international founders. And I will resist the temptation to spend all the time on visas. That's not the only thing we want to talk about. We're going to have a nice broad conversation here. And to help us on that, I've got a panel of experts, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves in detail at the moment. Just before I do that, anything that we say today is personal opinions and should not be constituted as advice on visas. If you want to know more, then please contact us and we'll connect you with people who can give you specific advice around visas. But it's really important that you don't take away from this anything that said that's exactly the legal opinion. That's not the case. The context of today, so international students make a net positive contribution to the Scottish economy of £4.7 billion a year, in all sorts of different ways. I'm not just talking about entrepreneurial ways there. And in 2023, 32 of the then 37 high-growth spin-outs from Scottish universities who are on the Scottish Enterprise high-growth spin-out pipeline were founded by founders who were not born in the UK. So this is a really important subject that we're talking about. And if you take the US in 2022, so very recently, 25% of the founders of the billion-dollar unicorns in the US first came to the US as international students. This is not were born overseas or whatever. They came as international students. It's a really important contribution to an economy, and it's really important that we recognise that. And often students are choosing their universities based on the fact that they can now get advice and support in family business. So as the university sector evolved, we need to bear that in mind. However, there's lots of barriers and some opportunities as well. So we're going to discuss that this morning. So I'm delighted to have with me a panel who I think are almost not quite sitting in the order that I had, but so Dr. David Donaldson, Senior Policy Officer at the University of Scotland, responsible for internationalisation. So that's a very broad remit. And David's been part of and led the launch of the Scottish Education Exchange Programme, publication of the Scottish Government's International Education Strategy, and development of a new Destination Scotland marketing campaign. He's also been on the phone to the Home Office this morning because, as we know, that was the announcement by Keir Starmer this morning. So David's got all the up-to-date, as up-to-date as you can be on that. So
sat outside the building.
Yeah, sat outside the building on the phone there. So Bonnie Hacking, delighted to have you with us, Bonnie. Program Manager at St Andrews Innovations. I'm one of the most passionate and outspoken people in a positive way about the importance of student and staff entrepreneurship in our ecosystem. Delighted to have you here. Bonnie delivers her impact through one-to-one conversations and workshops, designing and delivering workshops across the sector, and has a plethora of skills supporting students, from looking at ideation through advising and guidance and facilitation of learning sessions, etc. So thank you very much for joining us there. Bonnie's also the voice, a student voice for the in the Enterprise Educators UK, which is a really important organisation across the whole of the UK. Thank you very much for joining us. Dr. Salisu Uba, who is the founder and CEO of NatQuest, and I'll ask him to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Now, when I was researching Salisu, I realized that he's a supply chain management expert. That's great, because that's where I started my career. it's the young supply chain management. So we have lots of coffees to come and talking about supply chain management. He's also the member of the African Business Chamber and a lecturer here at Strathclyde on procurement and supply chain. So delighted to have you with us as well, sir. And last but by no means least, Fash Fasoro, who's a good friend and I've known for quite a few years now. So Fash, founder of DataKirk and more recently SyncPlex Lab. Fash is passionate about all things data related. If you follow me on LinkedIn, you will have seen over the spring he's ran some amazing programs to attract young people into the space of data. The one I really love was the drone-based program where you watch these young people flying drones around, racing drones, but only when they understand the data and that part of it. So some really innovative programs there. Fash has got a particular expertise in immigration and diaspora talent development. So I think, we'll bring lots to this conversation as well. So welcome to you all, and thank you so much for giving up your time this morning with us here today. So can I just start by asking you each just to talk a little bit about, just for a couple of minutes, about your role, what your organization or the organizations that you're involved in do, and really what is it about this subject that really interests you? So should we start at this end? Are you okay to start here?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Ross. My name is Salisu, and I am currently a founder of a company called NatQuest, which actually we started just by the corner at Strathclyde University, Inspire. What we do is given my experience in Nigeria and worked in Dubai and then moved to the UK, I noticed that there is a lot of gap in terms of access to supply chain expertise, especially for small and medium-sized businesses. Because during my PhD, that's what I do, right? Whenever any business is looking for some recommendations, I have to do that. So I see that as an opportunity to fill the gap by starting NatQuest. I also did my PhD here at Strathclyde University, particularly in blockchain and supply chain. And this is a very passionate topic for me around, student entrepreneurship visas, because I was one of the beneficiaries, or perhaps I have been through the experience of being on a student visa, skilled worker visa, and then global talent visa to founding company here in Scotland. So I'm quite pleased to be here, of course, and to share my experience, some of the lessons learned, and hopefully this might be beneficial to anyone that will come across this. Thank you.
Thank you. That's great. Fash?
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, my name is Adesomi, but people can't pronounce that and call me Fash Fasoro, and has been a name forever now. So I wear two hats in the community. When I talk about community, I talk about Scottish ethnic minority, and firstly about immigration. I'm an immigration expert, and what I say here is more from someone who is qualified to provide immigration advisory service at the highest level. So I'm highly regulated by Office of Immigration Advice Authority at level 3. So I've been doing that since 2012, and I've been exposed to a lot of the disadvantages that is associated with people coming to the country who are doing good and being stigmatized because of where they come from. And I'm happy to say I've helped hundreds of people to stay in the UK as entrepreneur. And the other thing from experience is some years ago, I discovered the risk of you being the skill, risk of you losing your job. So I took a career break from immigration. I went back to study big data at the University of Stirling. So I took that and I became a big data engineer. And from there, the passion to go back and support the community started, and I started using the skill of big data and immigration to empower the community. So like Ross mentioned, we've used data-driven dressmaking to encourage young girls who are not interested in IT to say, oh, this is not difficult. We don't this coming summer, we're going to go into the 8 cities in Scotland doing the same thing again. How could we reach underrepresented community? And that was why I'm here today. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Fash.
Thanks, Ross. As Ross said, I'm Bonnie from the University of St Andrews, and I'm really passionate about this topic for a number of reasons. The University of St Andrews has about 10,000 students, about 45% of which come from 135 countries outside the UK. We have about 2,500 staff, and about 25% of our staff are from outside the UK. I just celebrated my 20th anniversary in this work at the university. The Entrepreneurship Centre only opened in 2021, I hasten to add. But I've been really passionate about it. So the University of St Andrews, under my sort of leadership, endorsed students originally for the graduate entrepreneur visa, which later became the startup visa, which then disappeared. And now things have changed again. And so I've got a long kind of history of this. And because of the profile of our students and our staff, I think it's really important, as Ross was saying earlier, to enable international entrepreneurs to stay here in the UK. And I'm passionate about them building their companies in Scotland as well, but that's probably a subject for another day. So that's sort of about me. As Ross said, I'm part of Enterprise Educators UK, and so I've supported the work that they've done trying to encourage government and respond to government requests through all-party parliamentary groups for information and guidance that when they were coming up with the changes to the different routes. So I think that's enough about me.
Thank you very much. David.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Dave Donaldson. I work for University Scotland. So University Scotland is a member organisation that represents Scotland's 19 universities. We do policy and advocacy across a whole range of issues, learning and teaching, research and knowledge exchange. My particular portfolio is in international, and I'm going to borrow a phrase from the Trade Services team at Scottish Government, who told me their portfolio was a mile wide and an inch deep, and that effectively feels like that. So I have to cover everything from research, transnational education overseas, down to international student recruitment. I'm particularly interested. I've worked in higher education and research for a long time, and about 3 years ago, I've made the transition to policy. Originally in research, and that's where I started interacting with Ross, and I think that's what really inspired me to get involved in here, because when I moved over to the international portfolio, I realized that we weren't taking advantage of entrepreneurship and the ambition of students who've basically moved from one place in the world to come here. As I don't think we were taking advantage of that as much as we could do, and started to get Ross interested in it as well.
Cool. Excellent. Thank you, David. I'm going to stay with you, actually. I just want to talk about how important international students are to Scotland and the Scottish economy. And just sort of, I've mentioned a couple of bits of data around scale, but generally around international students. How important are they?
Well, we currently have around 73,000 international students. That is a decline from the peak in 22-23, where we had over 80,000. Coming from, at the moment, over 165 different countries across Scotland. It makes up around 25% of our whole student population. And in fees alone, that brings in about £1.4 billion to Scotland. The economic impact, the last time that was assessed was a few years ago, but it's probably around 5 billion or so in terms of total economic impact. That international students coming is, everyone be aware that several universities at the moment across Scotland have particular financial issues at the moment. That's been reported widely in the press. We have 9 constituencies, UK constituencies of the 57, where students are in the top 3 exports for that constituency. That was analysis that was published just last week. So international students are really important for supporting not only that wider economic impact, but for supporting the jobs at universities and supporting the jobs that are around the universities as well. I think we're talking about cafes across the road and things like that, not just roles within universities. I guess in terms of keeping it in the financial space, they bring in the university, that money that comes in is around 150% FEC, which means around a third of that is money that we can cross-subsidize other parts of the system. So research and innovation, runs at a loss. So everything, commercialization, spin-outs, a lot of that happens because we have international students. And I think broadly within our own society as well, the fact that we have universities in places and not necessarily, all students in Scotland see themselves as a Strathclyde graduate or a University of Glasgow graduate. Having a university of Paisley is very important for the widening access and getting more students into university, and international students play a very important role in the finance of supporting those institutions. I think we've seen a real change in the past 5 years or so, really, in terms of the numbers of international students have grown quite heavily because of the UK International Education Strategy, which we exceeded the target as a UK of 600,000 students. But that market has really changed. We used to have a very prestige-driven market that we're really interested in league tables and kind of dominated by China and the US. There's a much more diversity in terms of nationalities that are coming now, and they are more price sensitive. They're much more career focused and potentially much more entrepreneurial because they are potentially less in that academic space.
Cool. That's a lot in there. I mean, we're going to talk specifically today around the entrepreneurial side. I mean, but you've highlighted the broader social and economic impacts, I think, there. So let's just get focused on that. We'll come back to visas later. We will spend some time talking about the announcements of today and potential impacts there. But in terms of let's pick Fash, the next one. So when you look at the challenges and potential advantages of being an international founder in Scotland, what do you think? What are the key challenges that founders face? Setting as students or staff setting up their business in Scotland?
Over the last 10 years I've been involved, I would say confidently, number one is navigating the complex ecosystem. When you are in a new country and you're based in Edinburgh, for example, and your support network are very limited, and in order to carve a niche for your business, you need to reach out to more people to support you. So networking and ecosystem navigation is one of the challenges that I know. And also the access to funding is another thing to say, okay, where will I get the startup grant? How do I even complete the application? Because some of the issues will be addressing the selection criteria. Many don't understand how to address it. Then we talk about credibility. When people don't know you, they are likely not to support you. That is a big factor that affects many entrepreneurs from where we come from. Additionally, I would say is belief that Scotland is open for them, and this is about trust. Yeah, it's also to say, should I apply? May not be for me, and say go for it. And many that we've supported say they have the ability, they have the tenacity, resilience, they can do it. So from my perspective, those are part of the challenges. Yeah.
That's really broad. And some of those challenges will be experienced by domestic students and staff from Scotland as well. So advantages. So what are the advantages? Is there an advantage of being an international student or founder? Sorry.
Well, so of course I will share my own experience. I actually I quite have this kind of entrepreneurial mindset right from day one. Because I've run business back home in Nigeria, and then when I moved to the UK for my PhD, I realized that there is a lot of opportunity to commercialize my research, right? And because I was funded by the Nigerian government, that may not be considered as a spin out of the university, because technically I may not be willing to go that path. The only option I have is to think about whether I can start this on my own, but I have limitation because of my visa, right? So I noticed that, okay, let me think about it.
Were you on it at the start?
I was on student visa.
Student visa, okay, yeah.
Then I noticed that, okay, why not I pivot into skilled worker visa, right? I got a job, I was in Sheffield, leading one of the biggest advanced manufacturing goods procurement team.
Yeah.
And again, without knowledge that I cannot register a company as a skilled worker visa.
So that still prevented you from actually founding a company. Yeah.
Yes. But one great advantage that I noticed on my own is the fact that there is a visa called Global Talent. And when I assess that, is quite something that I can fit in, right? So this is a big advantage for me to pivot into that Global Talent. And when I applied, I actually applied for Promise because I would say I underestimated the ability of what I can do, what I've done in the past.
There's a bit like I should say the underestimation and the copy. Yeah.
So because I don't believe that the system will recognize my experience of almost 13 years back in Nigeria and building tech in some of these most interesting dynamic environments. But I was wrong, right? That was recognized and I was endorsed as a global exceptional talent. So that gave me opportunity to say, look, the next day I got the appointment, I told my guys in Sheffield that I'm done. I mean, this is a great opportunity because I figure out that there is a path, right, or a route that can give me that ample opportunity to start what I'm passionate about. So that's how I actually started. And I think this is a very big opportunity to not just give me the visa to do that, but to show my ability, my credibility, right? Having that endorsement by the UK government as a global exceptional talent in your field is an endorsement. So whenever I have to change my tune, right? Whenever I'm talking to any group, investors or people that are within my space that look, this is what I hold and this is what it means. So I think that's a big opportunity for me. And then secondly, in terms of advantage, I have this because I participated in Eagle Labs Black Founders Accelerator. I noticed that the level of support that you get in Scotland, right? How the ecosystem is open, right? I know, of course, I have connection with Strathclyde Inspire, but again, access to information, access to different ecosystem partners from Data Lab to Enterprise Scotland to other organizations is quite, is quite welcoming compared to what my fears in England say, no, this is challenging. We don't have access to this. We don't even know how to do. Some of them are even thinking about moving to Scotland to get those information. Number three, I would say, even though that may not be positive, but I see that as a big opportunity. When I started my own business, a lot of people I had the chance to talk to here don't believe that this is going to work. Because I notice people have a narrowed mindset because of the environment where they are. We see problems, right, from a big perspective, right, especially in Africa. And every little opportunity, we want to make the best out of it, right? So because of the fact that people believe this is not going to work, I had to work extra, right, to prove that this is wrong, right? In our first year, we managed to reach almost 6 figures setting up a business, so which is incredible.
Yeah, for the first year, absolutely.
Yeah. So again, I believe these are all things that could be regarded as positive experience, and we have amazing guys that we work with. One of them is Kelly, which is here. We have a lot of amazing entrepreneurs that we work within the ecosystem.
So would you say as people, as an international student and professional, ultimately, because you built your career, that there's something you bring in as a drive and an optimism over and above that you might not see in some domestic students, for example? Is there a hunger, a bigger hunger? What is it? Is there anything that culturally you bring in?
Yeah, definitely, right? Because I would say this from my own personal experiences. We have this I can do attitude that you believe you can do it. So the reason why we have tech-enabled businesses is because you have no barrier, right? But people here, when you talk to them, is like they think small, right? They want to dominate a small market. But the way I see opportunities is, look, we can make this big. This is not big enough, then I'm not it, right? So this kind of mindset, I think, is quite promising in terms of the kind of attitude and the kind of mindset that I can bring, and I can change a lot of perspective of different founders that are, I would say, local founders here than us coming international. Secondly, it has to do with the dynamics of how things can be done, right? There is no straight path or one path to how things can be done. So that perspective, again, is something that I see.
Was that like an agility or what? How would you?
Well, it could be agility, but I would say it's just about different mindset.
Okay.
Because agility is just a straight pattern, how you execute it, but mindset has to do with everything.
Okay.
End to end.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's great. I'm going to carry on this theme with Bonnie in terms of the students that you've dealt with over the time that you've been at St Andrews. When you deal with when you're sort of working with international students, those coming from various countries, do you see different characteristics? Do you see different challenges, etc. In your experience there?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's internationally related in one sense. But building on what you say, I do think sometimes there is a different hunger there. There's a different kind of desire there. And in my experience, the individuals, I think, as you were saying, David, who have taken the decision, the initiative to move from their home country where they have their support network, they have their family, they know the way things work, to come to a tiny little country of Scotland, that takes an entrepreneurial mindset and it takes an entrepreneurial drive. But then they also have to have the resilience and the flexibility to be able to keep going. A lot of times the educational context is very different. What they're actually doing on a day-to-day basis in the classroom is different. And so for me, I think that does perhaps bring a different sort of entrepreneurial mindset and a bit more of a willingness to take that risk and to actually step outside that comfort zone and do something, so that when they come up with an idea, some of those barriers have fallen away because they've already overcome so much to be here.
Yeah. Okay. And just building that and the way the integration of domestic students and international students, is there anything you observe in that space at all?
It's interesting. I was chatting on the train to someone that I met who happens to work at the University of Edinburgh this morning. And we were talking about Asian students. And particularly Asian students, the educational context is extremely different. The language is extremely different. And they have a tendency, and I'm being, I'm kind of globalizing it here, that they have a tendency to kind of group together, to be only with students from their own country. And at least in St Andrews, there are enough of them that that's possible. If you come on more to the Nigerian students, or maybe some of the other students from countries which are not so heavily represented, they don't have that opportunity. And so for me, I think that plays into a little bit. If they stay in that kind of cultural bubble of students like them, yeah. But if they step out of that and they integrate more with other students, not just from the UK, but students from everywhere, I think that helps them to broaden their experience a bit.
Cool. That's great. Thank you for that. David, I'm going to sort of move us on to talk a little bit about visas and immigration policy that's live at the moment. Do you want to just sort of give a bit of a description about what you're seeing today happening, and then we'll just sort of work that back into how might that affect visas and things like that?
Yeah, so we've seen a lot of speculation over the past few months about what might happen today in the immigration white paper. What we've seen is a reduction in the graduate route from 24 months down to 18 months. That is, I think, at least considering some of the suggestions they've had, they've been speculating in the press. I think that could be seen as an advantage, that it hasn't been reduced even further or linked to skills. So it still allows that flexibility that students have.
So that means can you explain that? So after graduation,
you can apply for the graduate visa. Previously, it was 2 years, and you are then free to work or not work if you choose in any way. So you can freelance, you can set up, you start working, be self-employed, etc. Or take on any role without any restrictions on salary, which is in contrast to the skilled worker visa, where there are quite high salary thresholds at the moment.
You still can't set up a business.
Yeah.
Visa, yeah. Okay, that's helpful.
On the graduate visa, you can.
Sorry, so speak out loud.
I thought on the graduate visa, you can. On the graduate visa, you can.
Okay.
Yeah, graduate visas are allowed to set up company in the UK, and their dependent can also do the same.
Yeah, thank you. I must say. So yeah, cool. And other changes that you're seeing? Let's just get the sort of the up to date.
I think the broader route is just going to be a lot more restrictions on the health and social care visa, which several students have used to stay longer in the UK due to the salary thresholds. There's going to be a lot more mapping towards skills through this quad between the Industrial Strategy Council, DWP, the MAC, and skills agencies. For universities, there's going to be some changes around visa compliance rules, and they're possibly going to introduce a charge for international students on fees to universities, which is speculated 5 to 6% at the moment. So,
Okay, so that's the fees they pay.
yes, that's the implication. Also, it doesn't appear to have been worked out. I guess the thing that we don't know at the moment, and was asked this morning, was around PhD students and their 3-year entitlement on the graduate route, and that appears to be not affected, but they couldn't confirm that. The Home Office can't confirm
So
that.
the question was asked, but there was no direct response.
Yes, they don't anticipate any changes to PhDs. That's what we said.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Anything else on the that you've observed on this morning's white paper?
I think it's a lot. There was a lot of speculation around restrictions on particular nationalities, Nigeria and Pakistan, and that hasn't happened, which I think is a bonus for us. I think at the moment. But obviously, it's a very live issue in the UK at the moment, and I think that the responses are at least more measured than we've heard they could have been. So I think.
Yeah, that's good. There's been a lot of speculation over the past week or two or so in the press there. I'm interested in that link, and it might be a sort of a topic of conversation here, between immigration and skills. And skills and training was the words. I think it literally was this holistic approach is about immigration and skills and training. I keep saying education. It didn't mention education. It says skills and training. So I think that maybe presents us with some interesting challenges in how we position this going forward as well. Because if entrepreneurship is something that you can learn, which I believe it is, you can learn the skills for that. I wonder how that links into that. I'm going to throw that open. I don't know if anyone was to pick up on that. It's like, is there a lever we can pull here around entrepreneurial skills and entrepreneurial mindset, which you talked about mindset, or anyone want to pass something on that?
I would say in the current visa regime, probably no. That they're quite clear about they want an individual to come to the UK on a particular route and to do whatever that route permits, and that's their main reason for being here. And while in my experience there's always been grey areas here, there, and everywhere, they're generally quite clear about that. So the current route would be innovator founder. They could start their business on the graduate route, but they'll have to switch to innovator founder if they want to remain in the UK after their graduate route ends.
So it gives a bit more on that. So in sense of that, so but they take up a graduate visa,
Yep.
and then move to an
innovator founder. So innovator founder. Originally, universities, a number of universities, St Andrews is one of them. The route was called innovator, and we could endorse people. And then 2 years ago, they closed the startup route and the innovator route. We became legacy endorsing bodies, and it's now innovator founder. And it went down from, there were about 30 endorsing bodies, of which a number of them were universities and incubators and all sorts of stuff. And they now have 3 endorsing bodies plus a government program. The criteria are the same as they were before. It has to be a new business. You cannot join an existing one. It has to be innovative, it has to be viable, and it has to be scalable. And you have to be endorsed by one of those 3 bodies in order to do that. And my challenge with it, Ross, has always been, as a student on a student visa, you are not allowed to be self-employed or start a business. And so if you're going to start a business, which is now relevant for innovator founder, I think you're going to really struggle to do that in the 2 years of your current graduate visa. You need more time than that.
Absolutely.
And so my soapbox has always been, as a student, you're allowed in general to work 20 hours a week during semester, and then full-time in the breaks, or either in vacation time without summer, or over Christmas. And I have never understood why they can't work for their own business in those 20 hours a week. There's no barrier on salary. You could work 20 hours a week as a consultant, earning big money as a student, and that's fine as long as you're within your 20 hours a week.
So you can effectively work for somebody else.
Correct. As an employee. And so I never understood why the route could not be opened up, the student route could not be opened up to let them work on their business for 20 hours a week, which to me then would feed into then for you'd maybe be earning enough that you could support yourself for your 2 years on your or 18 months on your graduate route, making a direct contribution to the economy. And then you'd be much more ready when it's time to do Innovative Founder at the end of your graduate route.
And you could be involved in those programs at the same time that are offered across most of our universities, essentially. They did. Sorry, I got to it.
I think the real problem with that is that, you know, you'll be aware from last year when they did the MAC, the Migration Advisory Council, did a review of the graduate route. At least certain politicians calling it the Deliveroo visa, and it's kind of how do you kind of ensure that the government feels comfortable that it's not open for abuse in that space, and that well, who can accredit that student is working on a business rather than in the kind of where at least a former government would have considered the sort of gig economy as an abuse of the system in some ways. So
currently for the student visa, it's up to the student to actually know that they're not going over their 20 hours a week. It's not up to the employer. Yeah. And so for me, I think that would be where it would come in. And if that student is linked through, say, their entrepreneurship center, some other university program, I'm not saying we would want responsibility for that. But if anyone asked, we can actually say, yes, I know the student. Yes, I've spoken to them about their business. So I just find that whole fascinating.
I also want to emphasize that lots of students who are not aware of the 20 hours rule. It's being calculated Monday to Sunday. So if you do more than 20 hours, your visa can be curtailed. Yeah. And curtailment means it's cancelled. And I had the webinar last year. 40 people came on it and their visa were cancelled. So they applied for graduate visa. They were given, and Home Office wrote back to them that they used deception to attain the graduate visa, because they went to HMRC and they were able to, like you mentioned, they were not aware. The employer gave them Saturday, Sunday, sometime to work outside their 20 hours. And so it is always good to know. It's always good to advise the student. 20 hours means Monday to Sunday. Yeah.
So just probably to ask in terms of, I'm not quite familiar with the innovator visa, but I think Global Talent is a great visa for if you are interested in both working and exploring the entrepreneurship, which is a great thing to do. And especially for masters and PhD students, most of them might be qualified for the visa because of if you have worked in the past, you have some experience and you have a concrete plan as to what you want to do and how this is going to contribute to, I think, about 3 key sectors: research, agriculture, and
Humanity
and tech. Yeah,
it's about 5 domains.
3 domains actually. Yeah, so this is also a very important and interesting area where you can both work without any limitation in terms of the number of hours that you can work, as well as start your business as you progress, which I think might be beneficial.
And Global Talent leads to indefinite leave to remain in 3 years, not 5, so as the other routes do.
Yeah. So Global Talent, indefinite leave. And when we talk about indefinite
leave to remain,
is that changing to 10 years now? 10 years, just that's very small. Is that the same thing?
But
so they're different things.
Yeah, but that's for certain categories of people, I think.
So the details have not been announced. But extending from 5 years to 10 years. Like Salisu mentioned, Global Talent is the best visa for migrants in the country at the moment. Many are not applying. Many are not aware.
Yeah, there's lack of awareness.
Yeah.
So how would a student apply for that? So based on your experience.
So I think the process is quite. I would talk about tech. Yeah, as that's where I have my experience.
You were talking.
Yeah, so you need to basically apply for endorsement to Tech Nation. So Tech Nation is the official endorsing body for tech, and basically what you need is pieces of evidences and track record in terms of what you have done in the past, right? Why you are a potential or a leader in tech. And what it means by a leader in tech is that you have more than 5 years experience within the technology sector. And if you have less than 5 years, it means you have the promise to become a leader. get about 3 recommendations. There is mandatory and optional criteria which you have to show how you fit into those requirements. And these are things, for example, you have worked in tech and you have significant contribution in product development, commercialization. You don't have to be a core tech person. That's technical skills. You can have the commercial skills, which of course I have.
You're still working in the tech.
Yes. Yeah. So they have a definition of what they call product-led. And product-led company means a company that has up to, I think if I can recall, up to 80% of their revenue from a product or a solution that they have developed. It could be hardware or software, right? And then of course all the other optional criteria centers around your contribution to the community, things that you passionately do outside your normal job, things like mentoring, participating in conferences, something that would show beyond work for cash, right? That you have done to the sector to contribute significantly to its growth. And then, of course, your plan in terms of what you plan to do, either to work or to set up a business or whatever you plan to do. So it's as straightforward as...
So that's the technology domain, technical domain, and the other, taking into account the other domains as well. Where would a student or a staff member or researcher go to find out what you just explained? Where would they get that information from?
So again, for Tech Nation, there is an incredible community. They call it the alumni of Tech Nation, where you can get a lot of information. And most of them, they have guidance on how you can apply for these visas. Yeah, because sometimes you are the best person that know yourself, right? You should be able to map out what your skills, your experience, your contributions are. And of course, if you get that. But one thing that I notice is, even among the immigration, because it's a new visa, right? So a lot of people are not even aware of how it works, right? And some of the requirements, how you can fit in the requirements and things. When I was applying for my indefinite, there's a legal guy that told me that no, it's not going to happen in 3 years. I said, no, but this is what it says. And the good thing about global talent is if you spend any time on skilled worker visa, it counts toward your 3 years or 5 years. So that's a big bonus.
Yeah.
And for your dependents, if they spend 5 years, let's say 3 years of their time under your student visa, right? They only need 3 years on your global talent to qualify for their indefinite. So again, that's also a very big opportunity.
I'd say the information is widely available. And in my experience, international students in particular are very hot on visa routes. I would say some of them are less switched on in terms of what are the conditions on their visa, like working 20 hours a week or whatever it might be. But they're very aware of what the routes are. Global talent, I would have thought, is probably less likely for an undergrad or maybe a top postgrad, possibly a PhD.
Yeah, PhD.
Probably, yeah, it's probably more relevant for staff, I would say, unless their PhD is in something really specific.
Yeah, I was just going to say, obviously we have a government-run service to help with immigration through Scotland's Migration Service, but whether or not they are advising students who may be eligible for the Global Talent Visa or other alumni, it's not clear at the moment. But there's certainly somewhere that we can pick up and have a look at.
Just finishing off the visa pitch, what would you guys like to see change? I mean, Bonnie's put forward her proposition, which I love. I think it's great. It's really good. Fash, what would you like to see change?
We, as a community, we are seeing people dying. People are being stressed because of visa changes, especially in the area of immigration health surcharge. Health surcharge is a barrier to how people can remain in the country. For example, a family of 4 who are currently a student needing to go into global talent or into innovator for under visa, we need a minimum of £25,000 to remain in the country. If we can create a pressure group that people who have lived here for more than 1 year do not need IHS fee, just like financial requirements are being exempted for them, that will be because a lot of people are going to low-skill jobs because they are not able to pay the immigration health surcharge. and that's become a barrier, significant barrier.
Okay, interesting. Any other changes that we'd like to see in the, let's call it the regulatory space? We can talk more broadly about other things, but
No, I think for me, just like Fash has said, the cost is quite a factor, right? I'll give you an example. I switched from student visa to skilled worker visa and then to global talent.
Yeah.
So throughout this journey, I have spent almost £50,000. So this is not something that if you're not lucky, you can even have access to this particular. You have no technically access to anything, right? To be honest, this, especially if you're on global talent, is skilled worker visa, you're already contributing to NI, right? Pay for your NI, and you have to pay for health surcharge, right? And we don't get, of course, if you are a skilled worker visa and you switch to global talent, you can get your health surcharge back, right? But again, that's a lot of money, right? Only, it's a lot, right?
yes,
And then secondly, I think,
especially when you're looking at founding a business, obviously there's the cost of founding a business and the investment needed is incremental. It's not a bit, it's on top of that. So that's a double barrier in that sense.
yeah. And then I think secondly, again, has to do with a bit of disparity in terms of people that are global talents and their dependents are also on dependent visa of global talent. If, for example, you qualify for indefinite after 3 years, your family need to stay for 3 years, 2 extra more years. And out of that 2 extra more years, some of them would need only 1 year visa. I have a case where a person needs only 3 months visa, but you have to pay for 3 years visa and 3 years health surcharge. It's unbelievable, right? And there's no justification for that.
Yeah.
So, these are all things that probably with the support of different entities, this can be sorted because it's quite a lot. If you're a family of 4, 3, that's a lot of money. Yeah.
There's a really nice report from the Royal Society as well, which shows a global comparison of how expensive the UK visa system is to everywhere else. So
And it's a lot more expensive.
It's a lot. They provide a mean with and without the UK in there because it causes such a significant shift in the mean visa costs across the world, or at least it's a range of comparator nations of the whole world.
I think when we when we look at what we're talking about here, and we look at the integral links between economy, education, entrepreneurship, international movement, migration, etc., there's a huge the relationship of all of those is so complex in that, and unforeseen consequences of changes are often the case.
Just talking about the things that we'd like to see, and I think there's a piece around, I think, career support for international student and enterprise agencies in a kind of slightly more holistic view, that there's not two separate things, that they are sort of intertwined in many ways, that would be helpful. We know that international students probably don't take as much use of careers advice services at universities as they could do. I think there's
You say we know that's
there's some data on the UK level that suggest something only like sort of 5 to 10% got their job through careers advice services at the universities. So I think there's a piece there. And I guess the other thing that we see with international students is, in terms of the skilled worker visa, there was the data from 2016 to 2020 which showed that 44% of all skilled worker visas were issued in London. And we know that from the graduate route review last year, there's a net outflow of Scotland of about 14% of students who've moved to probably London, but somewhere else in the UK, before they've even applied for the graduate route visa. So I think there's more that we could do to retain some of that talent in Scotland, and that they are aware of the support that's available here. I often meet this guy who set up a study platform. And he, every time he comes to the UK, the first thing he does is go out and buy some Iron Brew Extra because that's his favorite thing. He was a University of Aberdeen graduate, but he set up his study platform website in Sweden, but not Scotland. So he could have it the whole time if he was here.
Yeah, and I think for me, one of the things, so having worked in the Career Centre as enterprise advisor before I joined the Entrepreneurship Centre, I think one of the missing pieces for career centres is actually helping students to get work in SMEs. And startups and entrepreneurial businesses. It's much easier for them to engage with big industry partners. And there are fewer jobs. There's I can't remember for many years, there's been about 20 to 25,000 graduate jobs in recognized graduate schemes in the UK, and that's been consistent. And that's for the 400,000 graduates of university every year.
I don't know what that percentage works out because my brain won't do it. I heard the figure of 15% go into graduate jobs.
There's graduate level, but they're not in a graduate scheme. But for me, I think that piece, that link up could come, that careers piece could come from how can we enable students, whether they're, maybe entrepreneurial or not, to get jobs in SMEs and startups. And I think that then starts to create that virtual circle of keeping people in Scotland in those SMEs, in the startups, but also then exposing them to that environment, which might mean that in the longer term, I think, oh, maybe I'll start my own business because I found my own idea, my own problem I want to solve.
Yeah, so I have, just like you rightly said, in Strathclyde, there's a program that my company participated in where we work with some of the students.
Yeah.
And the university paid 50% of the fees just to attract, and this is, I think, open to not just startup but SMEs as well.
Is this a sort of an internship type thing, or is it a
Yeah, it's just like an internship. You can do that on full-time basis and you can do that on part-time basis.
Okay.
Secondly, which is, I think, based on my experience, it has to do with some of the funding opportunities for startup here in Scotland. Because of the category of your visa, you don't have access to those funds. Even though the funds are geared towards the business, not you as a person, because I don't consider that as something being paid to me, but to a business. So until when you have an indefinite leave to remain, I think that's a big barrier as well that leads to.
I also want to emphasize the importance of immigration again in this area, because there is something called immigration salary list. Immigration salary list.
Okay.
So most, like you said, that students are aware. So many will move to where the jobs will take the box of the home office. So the salary comparison from here to England is another factor. But if I'm a business analyst or a data scientist, if I want to get a skilled work visa, I'll be thinking, being strategic and being intentional about, if I go to Data Lab in England, I will get 50,000, and that 50,000 will be sufficient to qualify for my next visa. But if I stay in Scotland, the salary will be 40 and I will not satisfy the requirement. So that's another thing to consider.
Is that kind of sort of barrier or tipping point? Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, just one more question. So the guys who founded businesses here, what would you do differently next time? And would you do anything differently at all? So,
Well, for me, I think the most important thing is to be more specific in my approach, right? Especially, for example, our first customer when he launched our product was in far place like Dubai.
Dubai.
Yeah, so that's quite interesting. I think what I will do differently is, yes, Scotland is the best for the business. What I can do is to find more ways to engage locally, which I think is important in order not just to tap into the opportunities here, but to build that connection, right? To make sure that, yes, they understand what you're trying to do, even though you may have a lot of barriers because, like you rightly said, issues around trust, people that you know, and things like that are quite critical to how you build a relationship. But I think it's still possible. Then secondly, I think it's just to be participate in more networking, right? Especially within here, there's a lot of incredible support communities, and I think we can do more.
Okay, Fash, anything from
Yeah, based on my first failure as a founder of Home Pointer, I learned a lot from it. But what I would do differently is to have the best advisors from the wide, right? So when you're in a new society, new community, don't think resilience is enough. Don't think idea is the best. You need people who can pilot you, guide you, and nurture you to be the best. That's what I would do differently.
Because that's a great piece of advice there. Advice is to get advisors, but yeah, that's a nice little flow. And then from an international point of view, from anyone that whether that's domestic students, international, that's the same advice basically. So,
Is there a particular network or particular kind of organization that you would recommend people reach out to in the first instance to either you, to the country, and interested in starting business? I guess it kind of depends on your specific expertise or the sector you are in, but could you just shout out a specific organization that got you to A, get connected to that network, and B, happy to build trust in that kind of sector as well?
Yeah, I have two organizations at the moment focused on entrepreneurship. One is DataKirk. We have about 3,000 community members, and I've just started SyncPlex Lab about let's venture together. There's no need for me to compete with Salisu. Let's look at our area of strength and weaknesses and collaborate. And that's what we're doing with so anyone interested, reach out to us and we'll nurture and support them.
Yeah, in addition to that, I think I have found Codebase quite interesting because of the dynamic. It doesn't have to be sector specific. And then secondly, FSB, which is Federation of Small Business, is quite really powerful and quite supportive community of not just founders in Scotland, but across the entire UK.
Bonnie, anything for you?
I'd add chambers of commerce. Your local chamber of commerce can be a really good place. And of course, I'm going to say your entrepreneurship center or whatever kind of support is part of your community, whatever community they're part of.
Cool. Thank you very much. Thanks for that question there. Any other questions online? We've got a question, Hayes. So, a couple of questions. All up.
So there's a question from Maria Bell online. I'm going to reframe slightly. David, you talked about stats maybe 10% of students go through the career office. They're not using their career service. Is that because the career service isn't suitable for your needs, and so you're finding the solutions elsewhere? Or is it that they're missing an opportunity to engage?
I think there's a bit. The international student numbers have grown massively, and the concurrent investment, I think, in career services hasn't happened. The particular stat, and it's wrong because I know it's some different number, but it is around 10% came from a study that UKI did with QS, or a major student recruitment platform. So I think those students maybe don't know they can engage. I think that's part of it, and they don't know that the services are available. But I think there is a capacity issue potentially as well. So,
and what I'd add to that from St Andrews' kind of international perspective is that the majority of students in a lot of universities are British students. And so that's where the expertise of the team lies. So certainly at St Andrews, we have a North American Opportunities Manager because we have a lot of students from North America, and we have an Asian Opportunities Manager because we have historically a lot of students from Asia. So I think you're right, David, there are capacity issues, but some of those capacity issues are related to experience and the country within that which that experience lies. So if an Asian student comes to the UK but wants to work in China, how do we support that? We need to have networks back into that country that help them to realize opportunities there.
What do you think is required for entrepreneurial initiatives started in Scotland to stay in Scotland by growing internationally?
Scotland is a great place to start a business, but when it comes to, especially if you have a high growth business, scaling it is quite challenging because of limited funding that is available, especially from an investment point of view. So it depends, especially if you are tech business. Tech business is usually global. Nothing should stop you from being global. Typical example is Skyscanner, right? I always give example with Booking.com, right? When I travel to Amsterdam, I just I was looking at the window inside my hotel, and then I saw a massive office written Booking.com. Then I had to check. So Booking.com is a Netherlands company based in Amsterdam, but everyone uses that company around the world. So it's just about having a great product that can scale, right? If you need funding, you have to leave probably Scotland to get the funding, and then of course build an incredible business, and it's possible to do that.
I'm sure that you and Aurora know this very much already, but I guess Scottish Government has an innovation strategy that has not really progressed very well. There's a lot of lack of investment in infrastructure for supporting that scale up, particularly for stuff that does have a bigger footprint like life sciences. We know very well that companies move away because of the inability to scale up in Scotland.
And a part of that's around, it's not easy to sell to government or to the NHS in the UK. And so we've had at least a handful of ideas that came, say, out of St Andrews that have had to go to the US in order to get a medical invention, into the marketplace.
It's a hugely complex area.
Absolutely.
That it's there's not one lever that you can pull, but there are a number of levers being pulled, if you like. I think at the moment, but I think it's such a complex system there. But we need to do more. I think we need to do all there. So. Okay, any other questions from the audience? Yes, sir.
So this one's a quick one. And you mentioned you start a business on a graduate visa, but to me it's a bit ambiguous with whether you can then switch to an innovator founder with that business. Can you do that?
You're not switching. You're in effect, you're actually applying for a new visa. So for me, the innovator founder is quite a challenging route now, I think. Because you do have to prove that it's a new business, you haven't joined an existing one, that it's viable, that it's scalable. I'd have to look at the detail. That is my understanding is you can do that, but you have to have been the one that started it. You can't then, like if you started a business, I couldn't join your business and go for innovator founder. But it's really challenging. And I think, so when you look at the criteria, there are 3 endorsing bodies. One of them has some great sort of guidance on their website, and I've been to some webinars and things. I think it's really challenging. So I had some students, so as a legacy endorsing body, we could still endorse anyone that we endorsed for the startup visa, for the innovator founder visa. And so I had to say no to a person because their actual business that they've been running for a couple of years on the startup visa didn't suit those criteria any longer. Because what it means is that you would endorse them, but it's actually the government that decides whether or not they're going to issue the visa. And they do all of the due diligence to check out that you've achieved all the objectives that you set out that you were going to do on your startup visa or whatever your previous visa was. And they check all of that out, and you can fall at any of those hurdles.
Yeah, that is the truth. And that is so difficult, so complex, moving from graduates to innovator founder visa and even sustaining it. Because once you cross the first hurdle of achieving the visa itself, then for your second stage, which is extension of your visa, you need to meet the requirement of your business plan. And as we know, business is complicated. So, and if you are not able to attain it, and it will be used against you. So our advice is say, don't do it alone. Find partners, use your strengths, and be strategic. Yeah, but it's doable. Yeah.
I'm going to bring this to a close, and I'm going to first of all thank our panelists. If we could show our appreciation to the panelists, that would be fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to listen today. If you've been inspired by what you've heard, please head over to LinkedIn and search for The Connected Network. That's connected with a hyphen, and join our community of like-minded people. You can also access our resource centre and discussion threads under the Connected Group platform on the Community Lab. The Connected Network podcast has been made possible through funding and support from the Scottish Funding Council, the Challenges Group and Podplistic.